Hey everyone, thanks for coming. Before we get started, I'm going to assume that most of you have some experience with a hackathon, whether you know what it is or have personally attended one. If not, I'm just going to give you a quick overview right now. Hackathons are competitive code sprints. They normally take place over about a 24-hour time period, either virtually, which is coronavirus safe, or in person under normal circumstances. In either case, you'll come out on the other side of a hackathon with a mostly finished product and maybe an award or two. This workshop is about going from that finished hackathon product or any other similar, mostly finished product and turning that idea into a full-fledged startup or business. I'll be presenting this workshop with my colleague, Surya Chokar, and I hope you enjoy. At the end, we'll open it up for questions, free Q&A.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad you can make it to our workshop. My name is Surya Chokar, and I'm one of the co-founders of Modulus.
And my name is Daniel, and I am the CEO of Modulus.
Great. So yeah, we're going to be providing you with an introduction to entrepreneurship. There's no way to give you all the information on how to get a successful startup going, but we think that if you follow these steps, most likely you will either have an edge over other people starting a startup, or it should be a pretty successful startup. So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, so before we begin, the first thing you'll want to do is actually sign up on Modulus, which is our platform for teaching courses and workshops just like these. So to do that, you'll want to head to modulusedu.com and then click sign in on the top right, and then click sign up to make an account. It takes about 5 seconds to put in your name, your password, and everything. And then once you're in, you'll want to hit browse on the far top left, and then scroll down to the course that says From Hackathon to Startup, which is today's course, and then click Enroll. And there we're going to be posting updates, tips and tricks, links, and any other resources we find that might be helpful for you on your journey in the future. So right now we'll give you about 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes, we're going to move on.
Okay, so now that you guys are in the course as well and have made an account, we'll just keep moving on.
All right, so here's a quick outline of the presentation. We're going to start with leaving off right where this hackathon ends. What's next for your product or your big idea? And then we're going to go over the implications of creating a startup, the steps to actually launching one, and then we're going to go over where we are now as a company and answer some questions that you might have. So here's what happens after the hackathon, right? So ideally, after the hackathon ends, you'll have what's known as an MVP. And this stands for minimum viable product. And it's the nucleus of any tech startup that is founded in recent decades. The thing is, most hackathon ideas die right after they're being founded at the hackathon. But if you want to continue to grow your idea after the hackathon, you want to create a startup. This allows you to scale your business sustainably into the future. And the MVP that you created during your hackathon is going to become the core of your new product for your startup.
So whenever you start a startup, there's more to it than just your product. The product itself is only one aspect of any successful startup. There's much that needs to be done both behind the scenes and in terms of marketing and stuff like that. So no matter what product you have, you will need to work on that product, but there are other aspects that are equally important, or in certain cases, more important. For example, no matter how good your product is, most likely no one will know about the product until you get it out there. So in that regards, marketing is quite important as well. Overall, startups are generally very time consuming, at least in the beginning, as you really have to get stuff started and get momentum going. After that, there is mostly going to be exponential growth if your product is successful. And of course, there are also other factors, like if your product isn't successful immediately, you might have to refactor or redevelop certain parts of it to target a new audience or change it a bit so it can be more successful. So it's just not about just the coding, and there are a lot of other aspects. And I didn't even start to mention finances yet. So just keep that in mind if you do want to start a startup, as you will need a lot of time in order to ensure it's successful.
All right. Oh, wait. Never mind. Keep going. So now we're going to go on to actually starting the startup, creating the growth that actually drives your product into success. And the most critical step in that process is known as team building. The vast majority of startups fail. This is a well-known fact. In fact, I believe the statistic is that up to 90% of startups fail. And of those 90%, 75% fail because the team falls apart. So this is probably the most critical step you're going to ever make. Coming out of Hackathon, you probably already have a team. If you know everyone in the team very well and you know you work together well, then your team is basically set. But if you don't, you might want to rearrange the team a bit so that you have the best possible chances of success in the future. To build a good team for your startup, you'll want a CEO. This is the person that directs the entire company at large and has a vision for where the company should go. You'll also want developers, preferably multiple, to handle actually creating your product, as well as people to help market the product and people to help manage business and paperwork.
So one of the first steps, as soon as you have your team, is market research. Market research is crucial to the success of your project as a whole, as it tells you which group to focus in on. One of the first things you need is to know what you have that the customer or any consumer wants. So for Google, this might have been a search engine, and for iPhone, of course, it is a phone that is easy to use and very intuitive. Whatever your product is, you have to realize which audience specifically wants it and needs that product. This will be called your niche, and audience is just one part of your niche. Next, you have to find out how you're going to enter that market. Practically every market that we currently have has other players in it, which ties into the final point, which is evaluating your competitors. No matter which sector of industry you are in or what product you have, there will be other people who are currently more established in that area. And also, there are certain opportunities that might be easier to enter into. For instance, for Christmas lights, during Christmas may be a great time to enter into that market, as there's going to be a large demand for it. And therefore, people might be more willing to try out new things, or just overall more demand for your sector as a whole. And evaluating competitors is actually quite imperative, as the number one question consumers will have when offered your product is, what's different about you? Or what do you offer that I can't get from someone else who might be cheaper or might be more established already? And so if you have a way to differentiate yourself from your competitor, something that shows that you're either better or more suited for your specific niche's needs, well, then consumers are more likely to purchase your product instead of someone else's. And that will be how you start generating business.
All right, so probably the next most important thing in creating your startup is developing your product and making sure you've tested it against your users. For a startup to be successful, the product needs to be excellent. This means three main things needs to happen with that product. Number one, it needs to be feature complete. What that means is that your users should expect everything they expect of a product of yours your product should be able to do. The idea is that your product needs to transform your user's life, even if only to a minor degree, to some scale. This is, for instance, how Canvas, another educational platform, tried to make their platform more holistically appealing to its users by incorporating every possible feature into that product. The next important thing about your product is that it needs to be well designed. This is where products like Canvas actually fall flat. Your users need to find it simple and intuitive to use your product in order for them to tell their friends about it and to encourage growth in the future. Finally, your product needs to be bug-free. Don't break the user's experience. If you break a user's experience, they'll actually spread word about your product as well, but it'll be bad word. It'll be like, don't use this thing because it sucks. And that runs opposite to growing your company. So you want to have these main three features in whatever product you develop. And the way to make it happen is through user testing. Chances are the hackathon product that you've created isn't really that great. It probably hits one or two of these features at maximum. But through user testing, you can actually get to achieving all three steps. User testing comes through two main facets. The first is case studies. This is where you invite groups of, say, 5 users at maximum that have never used your product before, and you track them as they go through your product and they use out the features and they test it, they encounter things and they see for breaks. This is the best way to gain valuable insight into how people expect to use your product. The second thing is analytics. You'll want to set up an analytics service such as Google Analytics, which can track how users use your website without you actively watching them. And then this can provide you with additional data through which you can further refine your product. So next is branding. And branding is an interesting and often, oddly enough, controversial topic because some people find it incredibly important and some people think it matters very little. And in reality, like all other things, it probably lies in the middle somewhere. But when you're thinking about the branding for your company, you'll want to have 3 main things. You want your company or product name. The name can either be extraordinarily unique or extraordinarily common. Common names come with the disadvantage of them being confused for other products, but with the benefit of being easy to find on the internet. Unique names might not reflect what you're actually selling, but they'll stand out a lot and they'll stick in people's heads. The second thing you'll want is a logo. Logos have a few basic rules. One of them is that the design of your logo should be simple and clean so that when you sponsor things or when you print out posters and merchandise, you can scale that logo to whatever size you want and it will still work. Another thing that goes along with logos actually is your typeface, which is your fonts that are used. If you look at the evolution of the Modulus logo, actually, you can see that we went from what's known as a serif font to a sans serif font, which means we went from the old typeface to a newer one. And this made the entire interface look cleaner, faster, and more modern. And that leads us directly into our third point, which is rebranding. Sometimes companies will have to rebrand as they find their target audience has changed or their total aesthetic has changed. And this is totally okay. It doesn't involve much additional paperwork at all. And by rebranding, you're often able to give your company a fresh start.
Okay, so another big part of creating a company is all sorts of legal matters. These are usually kind of, in my opinion, less fun than the actual starting of the company, but of course, definitely important and crucial that you do finish this. One of the first things you will have to do is incorporate. There are several different ways you can incorporate, but the most popular way is either a sole proprietorship or an LLC, and you'll want to incorporate under Delaware. So what this means is, the 2 different options are sole proprietorship, which means that you are the only owner of the company. So this is beneficial as you can make any decision, you're given greater freedom, and there's less paperwork that you have to do for certain actions. However, let's say that in some cases you do get sued or something wrong happens with your company. The bank can come after all of your assets, or all the company's matters will eventually transfer over directly to you. So you have essentially no protection from any legal action. The other form of company I mentioned is the LLC. This is the limited liability corporation. Under the LLC, you have complete protection as the company is essentially separate from you entirely. And so while you may run the company is an entirely different entity. But there is a little more paperwork and you cannot take actions as easily. Another thing is generally in hackathons, we might be competing from ages 16 to 18 or even 10 to 16. And at these ages, you aren't legally allowed to start a company. So then you have two different options. You can either use an agent, you have two different options for agents. You can either hire an agent or you can ask your parents or someone that you know over 18 to be your agent. An agent is essentially just a third party helping mediate things in order to make sure that everything is overseen by an adult. And therefore, all they have to do is fill out the paperwork and just act as a proxy. Assuming your incorporation does go through, which means that there is no other company by your same name or else you will get rejected, you will eventually be able to file for your employment identification number. This works as a social security number for your business, and it is also quite important to have. Another quick note to mention is to incorporate your company, it will take a decent amount of money, so just make sure that you are ready to do that as well. Your employment identification number actually allows you to do a multitude of things, the most important of which is probably your bank account. You can now create a company bank account, which is quite necessary for an LLC, with your employment identification number, and you can start using that to receive all your payments and stuff like that. For certain types of companies, it's important to get permits and permissions. Shipping internationally or working with certain materials, you will need permits to do that. And if you think your product might need one, make sure you do acquire those. And finally, trademark protection. By using any given name, you already have access and rights, exclusive rights to that name. However, sometimes it could be beneficial to go ahead and get more trademark protection just to ensure, and in certain cases, it will be necessary. And you can go ahead and search it up or talk to a lawyer or attorney to make sure and check whether you need that or not. But these are the legalities. And then of course, once you finish, there is, I believe, a fee you need to pay every 4 years or 3 years, depending on your company status to keep your company running. But that fee will be much lower than whatever you pay for incorporation. With regards to finances, obviously every company's goal is to increase their revenue. But the first thing you need is to actually fund your company. I already mentioned a few expenses and there will always be more expenses. So there's a few ways you can actually fund your company. Whenever you incorporate, you should always also find a way to split your equity. As Daniel mentioned, most of you guys will have to create a team, which means that there will be people you will have to split your equity with. However, it's important to also keep some equity aside to ensure that you can sell it if you need any investors to come into your company and therefore also provide you a way for funding. Another option to make sure that the equity isn't split too soon is you can make an agreement where the equity only goes to your team members after a given time period. So if a team member is no longer cooperating with the rest of the group and wants to split, they do not take a percentage of the company with them, and rather that percentage is split against all the members that remain. Your revenue is the amount of money that you will be making, and that will only come after successful marketing of your product and when consumers begin buying it. Investments are much easier to get in the initial stages simply because investors are likely to invest in companies that are just starting up that they believe will pick up as they get the most return on their investment. How this would most likely work is one of two ways. There are angel investors, which will provide you money for no interest rate, but of course you will have to pay them back. This is for people who do not want to sell any portion of their company and just want money without any interest. You may also get a loan from the bank. However, that will have an interest rate on it. And the final option is to sell a portion of your company to an investor, which they will purchase from you. And then they will own a stake in your company and you can use the money that they pay you to advance your company through our marketing, advertising, product development, and things like that. Finally, marketing and outreach. This is another big expense as marketing takes place through the use of ads and other things. For you guys, since you will be coding, you can use other hackathons to promote your product by creating workshops or even just asking the hackathon to give you a shout out. Nonprofits are also a big player. Though they are nonprofits, they still have grants and therefore they still do have a money flow. So if your product does cost money, don't be afraid to reach out to nonprofits, as they do have to spend their money on something and they could use your product if it is suitable to them. A lot of times other organizations, small businesses and independent businesses will also be looking forward to some of these partnerships, and they would be more than happy to pay for your product given that it is suitable. Due to our increasing media presence in this world or in this decade, you will absolutely need to have social media. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter are all quite necessary. And then with the current TikTok trend, it may even be beneficial to create a TikTok account for your company. On social media, it's really, really beneficial to you if you can capture the audience of other similarly associated companies. So for example, if they give you a shout out and you give them a shout out or some other collaboration, you can try to appeal to their audience as well, which is obviously interested in your type of product as they are following the other group. And finally, as I've said, you have to run advertisements. This will take money, but it is quite effective. The conversion rate will not be that high. However, any clients at the beginning stages are extremely beneficial, as the money that they pay you can go right back into advertisements and you can start building your brand and your product. So now Daniel will talk about where Modulus is now.
All right, so using these exact methods, Modulus actually grew quite a bit. Modulus, which you might not know, is the outgrowth of another hackathon. We won the best educational impact at Teens Take on COVID and placed among the top 5 in the world in the CoVLab Global Hackathon. And it was our desire to bring this hackathon idea to the next level that led us to start this entire startup company that we have here. So some statistics about where we are now using the exact same methods that we taught you during this workshop. We've reached 25 nonprofit clients from 5 continents that are actively using Modulus and Modulus affiliated services to run their educational campaigns. We have over 700 users spread across the continental US, Sweden, Saudi Arabia, and India. And some projections by the end of next year, we'll probably have over 10,000 users and 50 organizational clients that will be using Modulus on a daily basis. All right, we're going to open it up for a Q&A now. If you want to check out our website, which you should have already done to enroll in this course, you can do so at modulusedu.com. You can shoot us an email at hello@modulusedu.com. There's our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And we're open for questions now.